Hello and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rassool, and today we are speaking about food, food poverty, access to food, and most importantly, food kitchens in communities. Now, after the break, we're going to be speaking to the founder and owner of a community kitchen in Mfuleni, as well as a food activist, both of whom are part of the Food Agency Cape Town network that are interrogating the politics of food. But before that, we're going to look at a short film produced by Food Agency Cape Town that helps introduce these issues. Let's have a look.
There is something about food scarcity, eveli gquzule a household morale to its knees. More so for the breadwinners of such households, upon whose shoulders, bent and broken, the responsibility rests. Amaxabiso okutya are a less than subtle violence perpetrated against us, which we bear silently, our arms maimed by our economic exclusion to a point of defenselessness.
Ayindidike nale nto yale lockdown. Kwakunini ngoko? April 2020 kunangoku. Phezu koko abantu baphulukana nemisebenzi yabo. How are we meant to feed our children? Oh, yimibawo. Azi uba umntanam uzawutya ntoni. Awuke ndijonge ukuba sonakele kangakanani kwa esi.
No, mama, fake emanzini leyo nje imizuzu yombala. Uzawubona izawuba right. Sesipinatshi esi. Sizawuba right usosifaka emanzini.
Akunzima.
Sanqama sithini mama? Kaloku ngoku siphila kwixesha elinzima. Kunzima nokuphuma umuntu ayokukhangela imisebenzi.
Loo nto ayitsho uba masizifune phambi kwexesha ke kodwa nyani.
Owam umama akanawuze ahlupheke ndikhona. Hlupheko ndiyayazi. Ndizalelwe kuyo. Ndiyazi nangebala.
There was this night, yes, this fear-bearing night. I was half asleep. I heard people quarreling from afar. I wanted to go out, but I was very scared. Upper Mfuleni, you don't just walk out when you hear something happening outside. The sad part is that you can scream until your throat bleeds, yet nobody will come out. I don't blame them. In a hunger-laden community, the youth stops thinking. They think with guns, knives. So to come back to my story, I moved the curtain slightly aside and peeped through the window to see what was happening. The moon was lazy that night, so I couldn't see clearly. When I realized that it was Amapara violently pulling out the fence we had built to protect our food, my heart started racing. I was fuming, but at the same time ndisoyika. I wanted to go out to stop them, but these are men. Amadoda. I am a woman, a mere woman, a working-class black woman in an unsafe community. I let them take the fence away.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and today we are speaking about food, food poverty, food kitchens, and access to food. And I'm so excited to have our guests here today. Joining me is Hazel Nyaba, who is the founder of Uphakanini Community Kitchen, and we've also got Mimi Nyaba, who is with the Food Agency Cape Town, which is a network of organizations and people that have come together around food. And here's the exciting bit. We've got mom and daughter working on these exciting projects. Welcome, Hazel, and welcome, Mimi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we are speaking about food in a lot of different ways, and I think what's important for our viewers to know is that we're going to discuss sort of different concepts around food and access to food as we go into it. But Hazel, you founded and ran a food kitchen and a food garden as well, and so I wanted us to go into, what is What is a food kitchen or a community kitchen, and how was it founded, and how are community kitchens actually founded? How do they come about? Are they responding to a need? What gets you there?
Thank you, thank you. First of all, if I can introduce food, what is food? Everyone thinks food is something to eat, make your stomach full. We don't think about food building muscles and like opening mind and like building the person you are and giving you the strength to do whatever you want to do. And food is not just meal. Because normally we cook meal and eat and we call that food. What does that do in our body? Where are the nutrients? Where are the proteins and all that stuff? So food need passion. For you to produce food, you must have passion. The passion I have started when I started to do the garden. Growing food, watching the bean under the ground and watching the ground like breathing to loosen so that the bean can pop out. For me, that was food, because food coming out of the ground, produced by someone, not bought from the shop. So that food can build the muscles, can give the protein, can give the nutrients to the body. So I started the garden in 2017. After the few trainings that I did. When I started the garden, I was just doing the home garden. But the more I grow the vegetable, the more the passion grows. And the more I bartered with the neighbors, because you cannot eat all the vegetables alone. You have to barter with whatever I don't have. If you have sugar, I don't have sugar. I have to give you the spinach, then you can give me the sugar. That is the love of the growing of vegetable, to barter with people. Nowadays, we take agriculture as agribusiness, but normally agriculture is agriculture. Why agriculture? The culture behind the agri is what was used before. Because our parents were growing vegetables, others were growing maize meal, others were growing potatoes. So they come together when they harvest, they barter with those. That was culture. So now we left the culture to the business. Okay, the business that made us have waste with food, because if your food is not organically grown, you don't know where to sell. If your food have got holes and all that, you don't know where to sell, because the market cannot take the food. So now I decided to start the community kitchen and supply the food that I'm going to cook in my community kitchen to the ECDs, to introduce the nutritious vegetable to the ECDs. So it's how I started the community kitchen. There's a lot of challenges, but you have to focus on what you are doing. Otherwise, you will never conquer.
My Hazel, yeah, that was so beautiful. Actually, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking you're speaking about food, the growing of food, as if it is a spiritual experience. And I just want to thank you for sharing that so beautifully with us. Like, you've changed my whole perspective of food now. I'm sorry, McDonald's. but really, that was so beautiful. I just want to bring in, before we go to food agency also, to let the viewers know that when you say ECD, it's early childhood centers. Am I saying it correctly? And then also just to bring in, before the show when we were speaking, you were talking about, and you've touched on that, the importance of nutrition And so I just want to, you were telling me, why you were doing this, the story of why you wanted to supply the ECDs with nutritious meals for children. And I want you to also tell us the story of supplying the food, what you made for them, and the kids' response to the food.
Okay.
And sorry, can I just say, because we all are fed the narrative that kids hate vegetables. So please listen to my Hazel story.
Okay. Normally, I used to see it from in my house when the children separate the vegetable from the food. The only food that they are eating is like starch. They love potatoes and rice. They don't like greens. They don't like carrots. Even the one that is sitting next to me, she doesn't eat carrots. So I've noticed that children doesn't like vegetable, and no one is like have that passion of letting them eat it. If the child doesn't like, no, mama, the child doesn't like vegetable, that is all. Nothing else. So I thought when we were at school, they used to tell us, we used to do health education. In health education, they used to tell us what is building the brain, what is building from the vegetable, what is building the body, what is building everything. So I thought, if I start this from the early childhood, when they grow up knowing that vegetable is something that must be eaten. And the lack of not liking mathematics, it's because there is a lack of vegetables from the food that they were eating. They don't like anything that have calculation because they lack somewhere. So if I can start this from the early childhood and then they grow up, I want to see how do they develop to their education up to the standard of grade 12. Because normally they say if you lack from childhood, you cannot pick up from adulthood. The foundation must start from the childhood, then up. So when I started this vegetable, I don't put all these things. I'm calling them those things junk. I don't put spices. I don't put all those things. The only thing I put for flavor is beef stock. And I've got my selected beef stock that I'm using. And I don't boil the beef stock with the vegetable. I put the beef stock in the water first. It must melt because those things that they put in that beef stock, we don't know what is it. So you have to melt it and boil it so that something that is poisonous that is there, it must burn. So what I'm doing, I'm using herbs instead of spice. I'm using herbs. And I thought the children will not eat that. And then I made the spinach bread. That was my first menu. I made the spinach bread and then with the vegetable soup. I went to the ECD, I dished the food. And then the parents, the principal said, yo, I wonder they were going to eat it. Funny enough, before we finished, the first load came. We want some more. And the second load came. We want some more. And the principal said, I want to taste. I said, this is not for you. This is for the children. If they want some more, they must get some more. If there's nothing left, it's good. That is making me happy. So she was angry because the children eat the whole thing up. The second day, we made stamp and vegetable soup. And they ate the bowls finished. They didn't leave anything. So she said, Mama, you must start making like a little bit more, because the way I see the children love this. If I'm walking on the street, like right now, they are calling me, Makulu, when are you going to go and dish for us again? So it makes me feel during the whole, I must have dishes for them, because I can't walk past the road. I have to answer, when am I going to dish? The taste of the food is not the oil, is not the spice, it's the way you cook the food. And the way you prepare for the children, even for yourself.
Thank you, Ma Hazel. We're going to come back to you because I also want to, there's a lot more that you're going to teach us. I just want to move over to Mimi and ask also. So, Mimi, then, a couple of years ago, Food Agency Cape Town is a network that came together. You doing a lot of work on there. And I just wanted to look here. There was a specific project working with community kitchens. Is described as it's a project using food as an entry point to document social ills and empower those impacted. And so I'm going to leave that a little bit open and just ask you to tell us, what does Food Agency Cape Town do?
Okay, so Food Agency Cape Town it started, or it draws back to a network of co-researchers to which my mom was also a part of. It was a collective of farmers in Cape Town that were farmers, food vendors, and most of the time they would be doing research on land access, what type of soil that farmers are working on. So it was a lot of farmer-centered or agriculture-centered, urban agricultural-centered research in Cape Town. And then 2020 hit and COVID happened. And then there was a new question, how are people accessing food during lockdown? And that is when the centrality towards food came about. And then we went into a process where we started conducting a survey, asking questions about, the title of the survey is The Effects of COVID-19 on Food Systems in Cape Town. And that really saw the co-researchers, my mom being one of them. I was a mapper at the time, like we were going out into the streets. I was mapping out where people get food. There were questions about, just a brief example, what kind of food do you have access to? Do you feel like you have power within the food systems, So it was really, it centered this whole idea of community agency. And then with the process of co-research, a co-research requires a process in which, when the research has been done, you bring it back to the community, and you look at the results, and you kind of co-analyze whether it's outcome, whether it's actions that come out. And through this co-analysis process, we realize that we need we need to organize, but we need to organize in such a way that we not only conduct this research with communities, but we ensure that we voice out the needs of communities within the food system. So that's how the collective, or rather the network Food Agency Cape Town came about. And I am, I don't know, I'm going into the into my and I am currently head of communications for Food Agency Cape Town, and the whole question is around the language of research, the academic side of research, and what it looks like if you want to have a process in which you engage the community in research. And so that was my main concern in for example, getting into the podcasting, getting into looking at for example, a paper or an academic paper and turning it into a short form, was this question of accessibility, and how do you ensure that you don't show up to people, you bring a textbook and you think you're going to have a conducive conversation. It's boring, first of all,
Can I just say,
Yeah.
as I was driving in this morning, I was also thinking like, when we think about research, and I think it's a Facebook meme or something, or I don't know if it's actual research that shows like around 10 people read read a research report, and that includes the researcher's mother. And so I'm always fascinated by how much research goes out there, but where does it go afterwards? And so I saw that, you guys, one of the things around your project was giving voice to excluded groups and communities. And so I think that's sort of what you're describing. So it's not just collecting this data, collecting these experiences. And I often think when I read research papers, which pull in quotes and experiences of people's lived reality, what you're speaking about, so that people know, is taking those experiences and really magnifying that, as opposed to just putting the numbers in there.
There's a quote that my colleague, Sis Nomonde, she's sort of head coordinator for Food Agency Cape Town, and she likes saying, "Nothing about us without us." And it really it speaks to, I think, that relationship with communities and researchers, that the extractive nature of research, or someone coming in and coming in from the outside. And I mean, also the question of, and then what happens to the research after you've come to, what happens? Do communities actually get feedback on findings? What happens afterwards? So I think it's also really paying attention to those processes, and I think what role that research can potentially play in communities and in agency, or in the agency of communities. Yeah.
Thank you. And I really want to unpack the notion of agency when it comes to food. You mentioned it also, I think, in one of the questions you said from the research studies, like, do you feel you have control or agency within the food system? But we need to take a short break. So we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are speaking about food poverty, about access to food, about food kitchens, or what we're now calling community kitchens. And still with us in studio to tell us more about this is Hazel Nyaba, who is the founder of Uphakanini Community Kitchen, and Mimi Nyaba. Yes, they are related. From Food Agency Cape Town, which is a network that has of individuals and organizations that have formed around food. And Hazel, before the break, you were speaking to us a lot about the importance of not just eating food, but the nutrition of food, how important it is for us to recognize how food builds our bodies, and what we put into our bodies. But running a community kitchen or a food kitchen, one of the things that is brought up often is the question of dignity and shame. And you spoke about this as this being a component of people accessing food kitchens, of queuing, and some of the ways that you have set up your programs and your feeding to try and deal with that or help with that. Can you tell us a bit more about that? And I don't know if this comes up in conversations when you sit with the women, when you sit with the people in the community. Do they speak about the shame of having to go to a food kitchen to access food when they can't?
Okay, there was a soup kitchen in the row in my community where people went and made queue there, and some of them didn't go because they send their children to go and collect food for them. Through the research that we were doing during the COVID, we noticed that most of the people are hungry, but they don't go to the soup kitchen to chew because of the shame and the stigma. So the reason why we as FACT decided it's the outcomes of the research that we are doing. Then we decided to start the community kitchen, not the soup kitchen, because the soup kitchen have got the stigma. So to get rid of the stigma, we must have a community kitchen. A community, like a soup kitchen, is a kitchen that is owned by an old woman like me. The focus is just cooking food and dishing food for the people. But we don't care if those people have the say or what. We just dish and give the people food, they go. Even they like or they don't like, they don't have a say because they are hungry. But with the community kitchen, the community kitchen is not just for dishing and all that stuff. There are activities, there are programs that are run in the community kitchen. For instance, when I started Uphakanini, I didn't start Uphakanini so that I can be one who is at Uphakanini. I started Uphakanini with the mind of getting the youth involved. So I have children that I had it at Uphakanini, that I was giving them the stipend of 1.2. The reason why, the children doesn't want to go and sit and do things for nothing. So I gave them the 1.2 without my heart, because I wanted them to see the importance of dealing with the community. What is important to work with the community? What is important to be involved with cooking and all that stuff? And I also showed them the skills of cooking and all that. Okay, I started with five. There were 5 girls. I divided them through the ECDs. The others were in the other ECDs, and the others were in there are 2 that were cooking at Uphakanini, and then they dish for those ECDs. So it went very nice, and they were showing like they are interested. Now I want to start cooking for the community, not only the ECDs. It's going to happen like now, recently. We are busy now preparing we already thought everything that we could, but now we're busy preparing to clean the kitchen so that we can start cooking. What I want to do, I already built the structure at the back of the garden, where I'm going to have aftercare. I've got girls, like 20 children that are interested of dancing, but they don't have one who's gonna look after them. So for me, it's very important when I see children that are doing things in the street. Instead of letting them do that in the street, they must have a space where they are going to dance. It's sort of a little hall. It's not a big hall, it's a little hall. They are going to do their practice there in that hall. And then after that, the aftercare is going to be there, where the same girls are going to help these grade R1, 2, 3 children to do their homeworks. Instead of the parents coming from work tired, have to cook and have to deal with the homeworks as well. So that is what I want to do with the community, so that these children must see themselves doing something. This is the work of the community kitchen. While the kitchen is busy cooking, preparing food for these children that are in the aftercare, at least if the parent is cooking, is not cooking for the whole family. There is food that they are going to take home before they sleep, they eat. And it's not just food. It's going to be an organic food and a nutritious food. So that is the difference between the community kitchen and the soup kitchen. Yeah. There are activities, there are workshops, there are GBV, the GBV, I'm going to start with these children that are going to come for dancing. Because we'll think gender-based violence is based to an adult people. According to the training that I went to, GBV starts from home, from childhood. I grew up with it. That is why we as women, we don't want to speak, because we didn't speak while we were young. We were children, when we were maltreated at home. But the parents didn't know that they were maltreating us. So the GBV comes up from early ages up to an adult. So that is why we cannot defend ourselves. So I want to bring up those girls, knowing that they have to defend themselves. They have to have their voice. They must speak whenever they can. They have to speak. Because even at school, there are bullies. Those bullies, no one is like looking for them and like trying to intervene in that. So a child is going to go home heartbroken because there is a bully at school, end up that child is not going to school anymore.
Yes, so we've been seeing, even we've seen suicides of young kids as a result of that. And so I love the way that you are using, that you are, again, just to bring back that agency, you know, giving them the knowledge that they need in order to exercise their agency. And also, I think teaching them, you know, through this, also teaching them that they have agency, because I think that was missing from a lot of our upbringing. And also, I loved, again, you know, before the show, when you were talking about the programs that you want to run, it changes the context from the kids having to queue for a plate of food, so being in this position of feeling undignified or shameful, to rather participating in something wonderful that they're interested in, and even, you know, giving of their own skills, helping with the homework, and being fed while they are doing it. I can actually sort of visualize that difference in context. That helps, I think. And I just want to, Mimi, come to you just on the topic of agency, because you mentioned it earlier, and that was part of the reason to rebrand the kitchens from sort of soup kitchens or food kitchens to community kitchens. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit more sort of about that project and the forming of the network and bringing in sort of, Hazel, you mentioned gender-based violence. So how has that all worked out? It's a big question.
It's a big question. It's a big question. No, but I think it's also the magnitude of the work is also quite big. So we did the 2020 study. Yeah. We co-analyzed. We had the outcomes. Some of these outcomes are the community kitchens. Then the next question became, you know, what does it take to run a community kitchen? What does a community kitchen look like? You know, and this is where we partnered with a TMG research think tank to actually do a deep or an in-depth study into different community kitchens that are running in Cape Town, where we basically saw, for example, Uphakanini visiting Colors Foundation visiting Gogo's Kitchen in Guguletu. And here, you know, the idea is the women are the ones that are conducting the research itself. So they are taking photos, they are asking each other questions. How does this kitchen run? You know, what are you doing? What time does the kitchen cook? What do you see while you're in the kitchen?
Can I say, I think when I first heard about this, it was like an exchange program between community kitchens, right? Yeah. So community kitchens in different areas would visit each other and go spend a day there and learn about how each other is running the kitchen.
How each is running the kitchen, yes. And then we came back together after that. After those visits, we came back together. We took the photos and we put them up. I mean, just imagine as an exhibitive sort of space, and we really looked at what we were saying. You know, we connected the dots that were coming out, and there was a feedback process even between the kitchens. But what we found that all the kitchens have similar problems. So from the kitchens running in the homes of the women, the funding not being consistent, the donor fatigue, the physical resources, you know, from pots to gas to, I mean, Mama Hazel can probably speak much better to that. But I think what's quite important was, and it goes back to the larger part of the work, and I think towards that community is, you know, there's a need to zoom into what happens inside the kitchen, but there's also the need when then the kitchens become a more collective view of what's actually happening to women who are saying in different parts of Cape Town, who are responding to this crisis of hunger, you know, and the collective struggle. What is the potential of that? And then the individual kitchen struggles, you know, which is the gas, the day-to-day running of kitchens. I want to draw back to your question, but I've also lost track.
Yeah, and it was multifaceted. I just want to ask, you know, because I'm thinking about what you are saying, and I'm thinking about the research, and I'm remembering, you know, in terms where you're speaking about donor fatigue and how a lot of the kitchens are run from women's own homes where they live, and then looking at, you know, what it takes of physical things like gas and what it takes. And Hazel, you know, again, before the show when we were speaking, you launched that kitchen yourself using money from your own salary.
Yes.
For the 3 years it was running, so much so that when you, you know, when your contract finished or you stopped working, you could not fund that kitchen. So it was purely your own funds. And I think so, Mimi, I want to ask, you know, is that common? Is it common for the food kitchens to just spring up and people are funding it themselves out of their own homes?
It is. It is. I'm thinking back to when Ubuntu Rural, and she was saying Ubuntu Rural's movement. They were running without funds for years and only started getting funding like 2 years ago. You know. Uphakanini, for example, in a similar sense. So the idea is, is with this co-research process, at least in the next 3 years, is to really not understand what it takes, first of all, to run the community. So recognizing all these different challenges. But the key question is towards how do you run a sustainable community kitchen that is not running on the backs of these women?
Because as we saw with Uphakanini, it was very fragile, you know, without any sustainable form of, and I don't necessarily mean donor funding, whatever, without a sustainable framework, it cannot be run with just one person's salary sort of forever. And that inhibits growth also. There's only so much that you can do. So that's a really, really good question.
And it's legitimate in the sense that the work that community kitchens are doing is the state's job. You know, this responding to the crisis of hunger, and more than that, is a human right that is whose responsibility is with the state. You know, so what does a future look like where these models of kitchens are actually supported and recognized for the work that they're doing in these kitchens? Yeah, so these are the difficult questions that we're really grappling with. You know, yeah.
And I think it's fantastic that we are having those conversations and that we are sort of looking into those things. Ladies, we have 5 minutes left. And so usually I like to end up on a note where we're getting some last words. And I think, Hazel, I'm just going to start with you. As someone who runs a kitchen, it is not an easy thing to do. It is, care work is often thankless work. And so you do what you can. I know when I've had other women on who do similar work, one of the difficult things for them is when and I'm just to be very basic, like when people become aggressive, while you're doing the work, or it isn't always, people aren't always thankful, or there's just backlash of certain sorts. Also, when I think if you are a woman who stands up and does something in communities, some people have said other people would judge them as just wanting some limelight. So I just want to get, as someone who's doing this work, are there any words that you just want to send out there? And also, I think any appeals that you want to make to people in terms of how they can help?
Same thing.
So I would just want to say, as someone who does this care work, who helps a lot, it's not always easy. Is there any ways that people out there can help?
Help with?
Do you take donations, or do you, if you could just speak sort of, I guess, to the country and say,
My mandate is, there are people who are asking what they can do or so on. Normally, I don't want someone who's going to give me money, because money cannot do anything. One thing I would love, if there is someone who can say, I can help you, resources. Because I know if that person is giving me a computer, it's a year-long run resource. And if that person can give me money and say, go and buy a computer, I know for sure I'm not going to go and buy a computer. And the computer that I'm going to buy, it's not going to cost. I'm going to go for a cheaper computer because I want the remainder. But if you bring the computer, I know that for sure. This is going to keep me for a long time. And it's a computer that is in a standard.
Yeah.
It's not a second hand. It's like a real computer.
That makes a lot of sense.
What I want, it's only resources.
Yeah.
Not money. I can work for money. I can do means of money, but I cannot do means of resources.
I hear you. Thank you, Hazel. And then maybe just like, we got 1 minute, but from the research that you've done and all the learnings that you've had looking at all of the community kitchens, if you could speak to people out there in terms of ways that what community kitchens need and ways that people can help, is there anything that emerged from the research there?
What community kitchens need? That's a very direct question. I think the one main thing, the research is still ongoing.
Yeah.
We are still asking questions. There are different components to the work itself. There is the work that the kitchens are doing, which is very much the physical work. There's also the work that I think, which is also quite important, is documenting these processes. Whether it's documenting the work itself, or it's helping towards writing up these processes as research. And I think those are the sort of the key things that we're trying to balance between the action and the research. There are ways to get involved with Food Agency Cape Town, for example, because we do community dialogues in community.
Okay, that sounds great.
So we do community dialogues, we do reading groups. We're also on social media, Food Agency CPT, where we
That's what I was going to ask.
yeah.
Where can we find more information about how to get involved, ladies? We are out of time, but I want to thank you both so very much for coming and to speaking to us about this, for the research that has been done, because I feel like it's really, really important. I want to have you guys back so we can start looking at food and policy and access to food and other things. And Hazel, just thank you also for your presence and for this, very different, unique, and I feel like it's a spiritual perspective that you've given us on food and on eating and this new sort of awareness. So thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
And we are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we have been speaking about food, food poverty, access to food, and the importance of food kitchens in communities. Now, before the break, we had a robust discussion on people's feelings around agency when it comes to accessing food. Now we are going to have a look at the rest of the short film by Food Agency Cape Town. Let's have a look.
I let them take the fence away. It wasn't just me who was awake that night, but the rest of the community too. Ewe, there were some men playing music, frolicking with girls, drinking expensive bottles. Mhlambi, they thought it was never their own business. Do they care about me? Do they care about a woman who grows food in the city? Grow food, elokshini. You know what? The only things that grow here are the number of deaths, the number of incarcerated young boys, and the number of raped girls. I have tried to intervene by asking them to do something positive. Yazi bathini? I am a retard, a primitive, isiXhosana who needs to move with the times. So when I went to see my veggies the next day, there was nothing. They had not only stolen the fence, kwathatha kwakuja oko. Yeah, someone said. That is what happens in a hunger-laden community. People feed off from each other. They bite the same hand that feeds them.
Hayibo. Oh, Nkosi yami. Yo.
Hayi, akusenani mntana. Uyabazi nawe abantu banjani.
Yazi mama. Anamsebenzi nabantu. Anamsebenzi nabantu tu. Yena ndinenzela unqumo mina kuyo yonke lento. Komelela kwesipinach. Aza sespinach. Ngafunga siyayazi intsokolo yethu. Daweni yokuchabalala. Sivuthulule. Siyaqhubeka simane ukukhula. So what are you going to do ngokuma?
Oh, andazi nami nyana. I have tried. Kodwa ngoku, hayi, I'm exhausted.
In this space, straddling lack and scarcity, sit our needs, dejected and wanting, in constant supplication, hand held out, to the hand that gives. Give us this day our daily bread.
Bread on barren seed.
Scavenging on the margins, that the scatterings of abundance, blown by the southeasterly of Table Mountain, find their way all the way down.
Tunyanga,
Mfuleni, Delft, Bukuletu, Khayelitsha, and all the other spaces that our non-being inhabits, landless and uprooted. We the people, the unpeopled people, whose bellies are open wounds, oozing the innocuous pus of poverty, of displacement, and recurrent hunger.
And that was the conclusion of the short film produced by Food Agency Cape Town, and also brings us to the end of our hour together. Now, we've had a really great conversation about food agency, but if I could pull out one thing that we can remember, it's what Ma Hazel said about being more aware about the food that we put into our bodies. If we eat healthier food, we will be healthier. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lenina Rassool. Goodbye.